Ready when you are, Francesca.
Just making sure this is all right. Morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Freezing cold in Canberra.
Oh, wow. Okay. That is cold then. Good morning, Councillor Michael Dudek. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Also in Canberra.
Good to see you both. All right, we will now officially start today's meeting. It is 9:32 a.m. and I would like to officially open the meeting and acknowledge the traditional owners and pay respects to elders past and present on the land in which today's meeting is being held. As we're all online, we have people online, just be mindful if you can't hear or see what's going on, if you could just let us know. The meeting will essentially continue to run throughout. We'll get you back online if there's any dilemmas. Are there any apologies for the meeting? There are nil apologies for the meeting and nil members on leave of absence. Minutes for this DAP meeting and other DAP meetings are available on the DAP website. The agenda is in two parts. We will deal with the agenda as it appears, dealing with part B first, the City of Stirling items, and then going to part C, City of Vincent items. We will now go to part B, City of Stirling. Members, can I have a show of hands that you've duly considered all matters before you on today's agenda? That is unanimous for the minute taker. Members, are there any disclosures of interest for these items?
No.
That is nil for today's meeting. We have for the minute taker. There are no Form 3 applications. We do have two Form 2 applications which deal with the same matter. We have the applicant online available to take questions. So we will go immediately to officers at the City. If you would like to provide comments, following officers of the City, we will then go to officers of WAPC and have comments on both items as they deal with the same matter, both item 4.1A and 4.1B. After that, then it will go to panel members and then on to the agenda items. Over to City of Stirling officers.
Thank you to the Chair. Yeah, so the development remains consistent with the previous approvals, still applicable with the current framework and the future framework. The works are minor in nature and are a result from the detailed design process to improve the overall site and the amenity around the site. The City recommends approval accordingly. Yeah, we're available to answer any questions you guys may have. Thank you.
Thank you. We will we'll next go to the City, to WAPC officers, and then we'll go from panel members to questions to both. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you over there. No problem.
Thank you.
It's Ben, is it?
It is. It's
Ben Hesketh. Over to yourself, Ben.
I've been abandoned by the assessing officer again for the second time in a row. This is a fairly minor application. As the City has said, these are just minor design changes reflecting detailed design. There are no regional planning considerations that arise from this proposal, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Members, are there any questions to officers either from the City or from WAPC?
Nothing.
If there are no questions, we will move immediately now to item 4.1A.
I'll see.
So I'm just moving up to just scanning up and down the agenda.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a mover for the recommendation, in 4.1A? It is moved, Suzanne Migdale. Is there a seconder for item 4.1A? It is seconded, Michael Dudek. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
No, nothing to add, Chair. Thank you.
Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
Yeah, also nothing to add. Thanks.
Are there any other members who wish to speak to the motion? There are no other speakers on the motion. Does the mover want to write a reply?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We are going to the vote as per the RA recommendation in the agenda. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. We are now moving to item 4.1B. Is there a mover of the item 4.1B? It is moved, Michael Dudek, and seconded, Suzanne Migdale. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
No, looks good.
Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
I concur.
Is there any other speakers on the item? There are no other speakers on the item. I'm assuming there's no right of reply, and I will go straight to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. There are no other items in relation to Part B. For the minute taken, it's 9:37 a.m. and we are now changing membership to City of Vincent, and we are changing panel members as well as city officers. City officers are they moving? Are you moving across here? The city officers.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See you.
See ya.
Our meeting is now joined by the two officers from the City of Vincent. To my furthest right, we have Councillor Ashley Wallace. We have Councillor Nicole Wolfe. To my immediate right is John Syme. To my left is Leo Donoghue, Deputy Presiding Member, and my name is Francesca Lafanti. Once we have got and just for the presentations, where do the presenters sit? Through there, okay. Just checking that all members are at Part C. Just taking me a little while. Okay, we will now move through Part C. Members, could I have a show of hands if you've duly considered all matters relating to Part C, including the information that was distributed? That is unanimous for the minute taker. Members, are there any disclosures of interest? I have a disclosure of interest. It is written in the additional material that's been provided. My interest is that I participated in the State Administrative Tribunal as required under the previous provisions, and in according to the provisions, I acknowledge that I'm not bound by any discussions and will objectively consider the matters before this panel. This matter has also been given to, this disclosure has also been given to the director, who's reviewed it and approved participation in today's meeting, or full participation in today's meeting for me. There are no Form 1 applications and no Form 2 applications. The application today before us is a Section 31 reconsideration. we will move immediately to that item, which is item 5.1. We have a number of presenters. They are listed in the additional material that's been provided. There are 3 presenters. They're listed in order. They are from the same group. There are 3-minute time frames for each of the presentations. And for the presenters, you can change the order if you choose. Just let us know, but I'm sure we can probably work it out. At the closure of the presentations, the first 3 presentations, there'll be questions from the panel. After questions from the panel, we will go to officers at the City of Vincent, and you will see that there's an R13 response from City of Vincent in relation to a variety of matters. We will then go back to questions from the panel. Following the conclusion of those periods, we will move into the item itself, during which period it is only the panel members who will be discussing the matter. So I will immediately move to our deputations. First deputation listed here is Mr. James Hunter. And sorry, for the presenters, all information that you have provided to us and to the panel has been presented to all members, and it was given to them, as you've seen in the show of hands today, prior to this meeting. Can I get you to assist with the time frame? Thank you. Need to put through and do this.
Okay, good morning, members of the JDAP. My name is James Hunter and I am the Chief Operating Officer at Stirling House. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning in regard to our application. I do have a PowerPoint presentation which you all have in the material for the meeting. However, given the very limited time we have today, I will not track through the slides. Instead, I will highlight the main issues we think the JDAP would be interested in regarding the approval conditions we're seeking to have removed or modified. We also have our planning consultant, Mr. Ross Underwood, and our lawyer, Mr. Paul McQueen, presenting, and together we will cover all the conditions being considered today. Firstly, though, a quick reminder about the IDAC service itself. It is a state government initiative and Stirling House has been selected as the operator of the service. IDAC will be a place where people who are ready to start treatment for their alcohol and other drug problems can attend and get immediate access to assessment and start planning their recovery. It will become an important entry point into the treatment system and it will address an urgent community need. We are confident that the IDAC can operate unobtrusively in the proposed location. We as an organisation have over a 40-year history of running alcohol and drug treatment services in community settings in harmony with the local community. Just 600 metres from the IDAC at our Serenian Central location, we are currently seeing the same people we'll be seeing at IDAC and have been doing so without any problems for over 20 years. Providing further assurance is the fact we have a very solid and practical plan for the operation of the service, evidenced by our operations management plan, which has been revised and refined on multiple occasions in response to feedback from the community. It is for these reasons that we consider it unnecessary to retain the current time-limited 4-year approval. This important service should be given the chance to establish itself without the threat that its operation could be halted in a few years' time. At the very least, the current period should be extended to provide a more reasonable period for the service to operate and prove itself. Without this change, as the 4-year deadline approaches, there will be anxiety and instability in the staffing team at IDAC, and key stakeholders will also be unsettled. This will likely impact operations negatively. In addition, while not explicitly a planning consideration, there is the fact that Stirling House has invested $4 million so far in the purchase of the building, and the state government plans to invest multiple millions on top of this to fit out the building ready for its operation. These significant investments of charitable and taxpayer funds could be lost if the service is required to close. Finally, we are committed to a positive and active relationship with the local community. We believe that the time limit on the approval could undermine these efforts by providing an incentive to find fault with the service rather than to work with us to resolve any issues that might arise. While the time limit is perhaps the most important of conditions we're asking for a change to, there are a couple of others I will briefly touch on before handing over to my colleagues. The first of these is the condition relating to transport of clients away from the IDAC building. The current wording is essentially impossible for us to comply with it, as we are not the police and cannot detain people or compel them to be transported. We would prefer, therefore, that the form of this condition already put forward by us is utilised, and Mr McQueen will speak to this point shortly. We are, however, committed to offering a range of transport options and strongly encouraging people to take these options, and therefore that's why we're asking the wording of this condition to be amended. Finally, we believe the condition requiring that blinds or curtains be opened whenever rooms are unused is unreasonable and it should be removed. Not only is this condition operationally difficult for us, but we also do not think there is a compelling planning rationale for it either. Thank you. I will now hand over to Mr Underwood.
Thank you.
Thank you, presiding member and DAP members. As you're aware, we seek the DAP's approval to amend 8 conditions and add 1 advice note. And some of those have been agreed by the city. Conditions 3.2, 3.5, 6.2 and 8 are all agreed. And in addition, in the R13 response, the city also agreed to a minor change to 2.5 and an updated 3.2. This leaves 4 conditions in dispute, and I'll talk to each of those briefly before handing over to Mr McQueen. I'll also note that in my presentation request, I'd included our proposed motion incorporating the changes that we seek. And if it benefits of that could be moved with the initial set of conditions from which to play. Starting with condition 2.2, the approval period, and I'll address briefly the planning rationale for a 5-year approval term versus a 4-year term. Firstly, the city has in its R13 accepted that there are state health policy considerations which are relevant and do apply in support of the approval term that we seek. And we also reiterate that there are planning considerations, namely state planning strategy 2050, the Vincent planning scene number 2, and the Vincent Vision 2024, all of which we've included within our response and haven't been properly responded to. We say all those things together provide that the use itself is appropriate, particularly when considering the difference between a 4-year term and a 5-year term. It's also worth making that point that in considering other factors such as amenity and management measures, they were matters that were relevant when the DAP originally decided to approve the use. They're far less relevant when considering the difference between a 4-year and a 5-year term. Condition 2.6, restraining people from leaving the premises. I won't speak long on that particular one, as we'll also cover that, but suffice to say that the city in its R13 response has proposed a condition that would require measures to discourage people from leaving without having transport options in place. Now that wording may be acceptable. We'd make the point that our wording that we'd proposed is worded in a much more positive manner to facilitate the orderly departure. We still prefer our wording, but it does come down to semantics. And I think either condition is acceptable to us. Condition 3.1, the modifications to the operational management plan. We know that in the R13 response, the city has agreed to move the updated acoustic report updates to condition 3.2. And we say that in respect of the changes to condition 2.6, our operational management plan does an adequate job in providing measures to address people leaving the premises, including at page 4, an offer of transport to other services or safer accommodation. And on page 9, this is of the operational management plan. No one to leave without an offer of transport away from the facility. In circumstances, our view is that condition 3.1 isn't required. However, we note that there is some desire to have that OMP further modified, that would be acceptable to us. Just finally, the condition 4.1, the covering of windows. I'd like to first make the point that we originally sought clarification. The condition as currently approved and as written doesn't specify or include any restrictions on window coverings at all. So we sought to clarify that. The response is to include new restrictions that don't currently exist in condition 4.1. Now, there will be, in considering how blinds and curtains are used, a natural tendency for people in a room, in a facility, to seek natural light. And that might be, for instance, the use of Venetian blinds, perhaps slightly ajar, providing some natural light and therefore some visibility into and out of the room. So I think there's going to be, even with curtains and blinds, some visibility between people using that room and the outside. We also make the point that if the intention is to only have the blinds, require the blinds and curtains to be raised.
Gone for 5 minutes. You are going to need to.
Okay, thanks. I'll wrap up. If the intent is to have blinds and curtains raised to an empty room, there is no person in the room to actually surveil the street. I was also going to briefly mention.
Will need to wrap up in 5 minutes.
Thank you.
So we'll move to the. You have got another presenter, and I'm cognizant that you've indicated you're not repeating material that each presenter's covering.
Certainly. We are providing a range of security measures, including on-site security controls and 24-hour operation. So with that being said, I'll pass over to Mr. McQueen, and thank you for providing me the chance to make that final concluding statement.
Thank you. Over to the last presenter.
Good morning, Madam Presiding Member, members of the panel. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. Madam Presiding Member, could I just check if I've still got my 3 minutes, or do you want me to speak?
No, you can do 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'll do my best to confine myself to that time. I note respectfully, and thank you for indicating that you've read the Laban submission of 28 June 2024, so I do not intend to repeat what is contained in that document, but simply a document. The focus of my presentation will be on two of the conditions, condition 2.2, the time limited approval, and condition 2.6, the supervision of clients. I also embrace the comments made by the client and Mr. Underwood in terms of the operational and planning rationale for our position compared to what is currently proposed. There is an important context that I want to make at the commencement of my deputation. It's this. Pursuant to Regulation 18 2B of the DAP regulations, as you'd appreciate, this is a reconsideration not of an approval, it's a reconsideration of conditions. That's critical because the approval exists, the amenity issues have been addressed, as Mr. Underwood has indicated. So the challenge or the discretion for you, very respectfully, is not about whether we should be there or not anymore, but rather in terms of condition 2.2, whether it should be 4 years or 5 years or unlimited. Our preference, of course, is for unlimited because we feel we can manage the amenity impacts through the OMP, but we would reluctantly accept a 5-year timeframe. When you deal with these sorts of issues, it's an incremental assessment. You need to consider what we have at the moment, 4 years, versus what we're seeking as a minimum, 5 years. And you need to carefully consider what the difference is in terms of impact on amenity between 4 and 5 years. I'm going to introduce a new concept today, and it's one of balance of convenience. It's used a lot by judicial officers when weighing up the rights and interests and disadvantages of a particular course of action to competing parties. My proposition is this. The impact on the community of an extra year, in light of all of the work we're doing, is minimal. And the benefit to the community of 1 less year is also minimal. You've heard from my client that the impact on us of 1 less year is significant. And the benefit to us and the community, we say, of an additional year is significant. So when doing that analysis, I would urge you to fall on the side of the scales, which are in our favour on that assessment. I also observe that in terms of the arguments put against us, as noted in the documents appended to the RAR and in the city's response, they're respectfully a repetition of what was said at the November meeting. And if I remain silent, there are no other voices in the room today opposing the extension, only a repeat of the arguments that were put in opposition to the land use. So when we conflate those matters, we've got an approval, there's a benefit to us and very little detriment to the community of the extension of time. And for all of those reasons, I would ask you to defer when exercising discretion in favour of our argument. If I could then turn to condition 2.6, as has been said by the previous speakers, we embrace the philosophy and we are committed to providing the transport options. It gets down to whether you fall on the side of the form of wording 2.6 in the Regulation 13.1 document, or, as we seek, embrace a more positive approach to the provision of transport. And if you were to align with our preferred outcome, it would be a very simple matter to amend the condition R13 form of 2.6 by changing two words in the third line. To substitute the word facilitate with the word discourage, and to substitute the word orderly with the word unsupervised prior to the word departures. There is no doubt, and we are committed to the provision of the transport options. I don't need to focus too heavily on the illegitimacy from a legal perspective of the original form of the condition, because of course we do not have the powers of police, but we are content to ensure that provision of those transport options. And if you read through the OMP pages 4 to 6, you'll see that we've got security staff in place, we've got people in precinct of Palmerston Street, Park. And so we are confident we will deliver a very satisfactory outcome. We will provide the transport options, but we'd much rather it be cast in a positive light. So subject to any questions you may have of me or my colleagues, once again, I thank you for the opportunity to make this deputation this morning. Hopefully, Madam Presiding Member, I came in close to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yes. Members, are there any questions from the first three presenters? Yes.
Yes, just condition 2.6. The city's provided an alternative subject to the R13. Am I right in saying that is acceptable?
In the alternative, yes. So the form of wording I've given you is a slight amendment to 2.6, and it creates a positive impression. But if you were against us on that, my instructions are, and my client can confirm, we would accept the form of 2.6 in the R13.
Has the same result?
Yes, it does. We're all about positive statements to the community, and we'd rather it be a positive rather than you must do this to stop negative behaviour. We would happily do this to encourage positive behaviour. That's the distinction.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have questions probably to James, probably more than anything. My question is, and the second two presenters referenced this a little bit, both Ross and Paul. I'm interested in some further explanation about time frame. What I have noted down here in the material you provided, as well as your comments, is particularly the comment you raised that a 4 to 5 year timeframe is significant. You talked about it in terms of uncertainty for staff and funding. I'm interested in hearing more in terms of a planning sense, in terms of why the timeframe is so significant. You also talked about the organisation purchasing the building, and you've also talked about state and various other funding for the service. What I'm wanting to get some clarity about is, and you can respond and possibly others can respond to this, I really want to get some further clarity as to why that is so significant, and why we should be considering that change from 4 to 5 years. Obviously, the further change that's been requested has been unlimited. My first considerations are around the change from 4 to 5. And I am not getting a clarity of takeaway message of that criticality on this particular proposal from a planning perspective. So over to yourself, and then others can comment on it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the three reasons that were stated in my presentation are the main, I guess, rationale for principally why an unlimited approval period is preferable. But all of those still hold water in terms of the move from 4 or 5 years. So in terms of the uncertainty about future operation, most of our service agreement contracts with the state government run for 5 years, not 4 years, for example. And so people are used to a 5-year term of contracts with our funding bodies. And so that degree of uncertainty is reduced somewhat if we move from 4 years to 5 years, both for staff and other stakeholders. That's a more normal period for contracting. So that is one reason why 5 years would be preferable from that aspect of uncertainty for staff and other stakeholders. And other stakeholders include bodies like the police and St John Ambulance and hospitals, as well as our funders and the community that have been using the service. So that uncertainty doesn't just rest on us as a provider and our staff, but it extends to all of the people that we'll be working with in running this service. So 5 years is a more normal period than 4. So that is one reason why 5 would be preferable. And then I think our sense as well is that 5 years does provide us that additional time for the service to establish and mature. And I think the longer that we have that period, the more apparent it will be to the local community that there is no issue with the operation of this service. As time passes and we're operating the service in the way that we expect to operate it, and we're getting the degree of incidents or no incidents that we certainly expect with the service, we think that as time passes, it's much less likely that there'll be an issue with its continued operation should we be given that extra year over the 4 years to the 5. And I think they're perhaps the most compelling reasons from an operational perspective why that additional year would be advantageous. As I said before, the unlimited approval is certainly preferable because it eliminates to some degree the uncertainty, because we do have, in this case, a longer contract than 5 years. We have a 9-year contract, which is unusual. So it certainly would help with that if we had an unlimited time period. But even moving from that 4 to 5 years does have some significant advantages from an operational perspective for us. And it's the reason why we're back here arguing strongly for it. If we didn't think it was important to us, we wouldn't be back here arguing strongly for it.
Okay, it's fine.
So, Madam President, we were hoping to have a comment from Mr Underwood and myself in relation to your.
Is that okay?
That's fine. This is a very important point. So yes, it's absolutely fine. And you can clarify on this. My information or the comment, the question I'm asking is a number of those things that you have raised appear at year 5 as well. So it's trying to understand why you say that is preferable as a time limit from 4 to 5, particularly in your context that you actually have a contract for 9 years, not 5 years.
Correct, but for the usual period is 5 years, and so aligning it with that has some benefit from a perception point of view for staff and others as well, in terms of certainty for the service. In terms of cost for us, in terms of our outlay, obviously the longer that period is, both for us and the state government, that risk in terms of the loss of that investment is also proportionally reduced as well. So there is a benefit in terms of the cost argument as well, albeit again an unlimited period would be preferable.
Thank you. Would other presenters wish to speak?
I may. I take a slightly different tact, which is there justification in the planning framework for a 4-year or a 5-year term, either or? And the simple fact is that there's nothing specific for either. There is, however, examples of 5-year approval terms. They're quite common. There are time limited approvals granted. There's one referenced in the RAR and the city's R13 response. And there are others that have applied to other community purpose type uses and things like workforce accommodation, which are similarly approved on 5-year terms. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr McQueen, did you have any further comments?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to approach it slightly differently as a lawyer, of course, from a legal framework perspective. And I'd like to reinforce the point that I made earlier. It would be dangerous and inappropriate, with very great respect, Madam Presiding Member, members of the panel, to pretend that we're talking about a use which is yet to be approved. We have moved beyond that point. We have an existing use, an existing operation that's been approved subject to development. When you look at the Form 13 and the bullet points on page 2, there's a reiteration of the amenity points that are relevant in the context of whether to approve or not. They have very limited, if any, relevance in the context of 4 versus 5 years. Because if there are no problems after 4 years or very limited issues, what difference does it make if you're giving us an additional year? So that's the point I'm trying to make. Legally, the appropriate prism through which to view the question is incremental impact, incremental difference between 4 and 5. Our preference is unlimited. There's a justification for going to 9 because that aligns with the approval. But I don't see, in terms of the material, and this is what you've got to do respectively, you have to assess this in the context of the objection to it. And the only basis for the objection remains considerations that are aligned with refusal versus approval, not really 4 versus 5 years, as I read them. And on my interpretation, if that's what we're left with, then the weight of the argument is clearly in favour of 5. So it's not for us, respectfully, to justify a very strong planning argument for an additional year. The question is, what difference does it make from the planning perspective? And we say none. There's nothing in the planning framework that says it should be 3 or 4 years and we have to justify 5. To the contrary, there is nothing in the planning framework that limits us to 4 and requires us to justify 5. Equally, there are other exemplars, which I'm sure the panel is aware of, where 5 is not an uncommon period of time. So the question is unlimited versus time limited. If you side with time limited, then 5 is entirely reasonable and consistent with our argument. As I say, and I don't mean to push this impolitely, the construct isn't prove that 5 is appropriate from the planning framework. The question is why, I put it back to you, is 5 inappropriate? Therefore, is seen to be reasonable. So I hope that assists, because the planning framework aligns with this type of land use. The approval has been granted. I feel as if we're being unfairly compelled to justify another year where there's no reason to do so.
Yes, you can.
The contract goes for 9 years. Why are you not seeking 9 years?
I'm happy to agree to 9 immediately.
What the original ask was 5 years, as I recall.
No, we wanted unlimited.
Limited. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the reason that we've gone 5 is as a worst case scenario because it's close to 4. So the human logic is, well, if I give you 4, potentially I can give you 5. We say unlimited, or indeed 9 entirely aligns with the contract that we have. So I don't even need to look to my CEO over there. I know my CEO would say yes, 9. Got a smile on her face. So we'd happily accept 9. But the same point applies. If we're giving us 4 and the land use is considered appropriate, why not 9?
Any other questions at this juncture? If there are no other questions, we will move to officers at the city. Officers, would you like to make comments about this, the R13, or any comments you've heard from today?
Excuse me, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stay there just in case.
Same just behind. Over to yourself.
Thank you. Through you, presiding member, there's a bit to unpack there. Perhaps we'll start with the last discussion point around the term of approval. From the city's perspective, yes, there was an approval granted. It's considered appropriate by the DAP, subject to a suite of conditions to moderate the impact and make sure that it would be compatible with the area. That was the DAP's view. The city's officers did not support the proposed development at that stage. So I just want to be clear on that. So those conditions were intended to moderate the impact of this development. So one of those conditions was the term and how long it would be on the site and its duration, given the setting which was fleshed out to great extent and great lengths at that time, which is, and I'll remind you, this is a residential zone site surrounded by residential properties, 360 apartments in the surrounding area, some of which are as close as 10 metres away. So that is the context around the appropriateness of the land use. The DAP absolutely agreed that it's an appropriate use. And so we're not disputing that the land use has not been approved, but when you consider an application to amend the terms of that approval, then you are required to consider against all relevant planning considerations. And the city's officers have set that out in its RAR. And we're of the view that by extending the duration of the approval, we've heard today that if it does operate without issue, then it would be reasonable for the time period to be extended. The city contends that you also need to be cautious, given the context that I just explained in close proximity to sensitive land uses, that if it doesn't operate as intended and there are issues and amenity impacts, we contend that the 5 years would be impactful going from the 4 years, grounding that in the planning framework where it calls upon an assessment around compatibility of the land use. So for those reasons, we think that it is significant going from for a 4-year period to a 5-year period. Anything beyond that, I just wanted to flag, whether it's 9 years or unlimited approval, that was not advertised as part of this application. So community have not commented on that either. So I just wanted to flag that. The city's perspective is that it is prudent to be cautious when relaxing any of those terms that were intended to moderate the impact of the approval. In respect to other terms of the approval and the proposal to change some of those, maybe happy to take those by exception. I just wanted to establish that that was the principle that underpins the city's assessment for the proposed changes to the conditions.
Thank you. Is there anything further you want to say, or we're going to go to questions?
Go to questions.
Okay, we have 2 questions, right, John, and then we'll go to Lee, or Ian, the first. I don't
Oh,
mind.
you go first. My question, so you go.
At the end of the approval time, when you say, what is the city expecting to happen at the end of 4 or 5 years?
City, through you, presiding member, what would the city expect? The city would expect that ultimately, if there's intention to remain on site and to continue to operate, even prior
to your contract, so you'd assume that that's your intention.
Correct. I'm not going to speak on behalf of them, but I understand that would be the assumption, right? If they're intending on remaining on this site, then even prior to that 4 or 5 year period, there is a demonstration of whether the terms of the approval, the conditions, ensure that it is ongoing, a suitable land use. And so even prior to the 4 to 5 years, there would be an opportunity for the proponent to come back through the planning approvals process to on that basis, have demonstrated and proven how it is successful. If there needs to be any adjustments to conditions, that can all be considered at that time. And that would be a more pragmatic approach in terms of a longer term arrangement to remain on site. That would be the city's expectation.
So how would they demonstrate that? What things do they need to demonstrate?
Things to consider through presiding member in terms of demonstrating it would be successful in that this current configuration as proposed, is having a look at things like complaints register, whether the city has heard from community members around whether it has been operating in accordance with the intention, or whether there's been unforeseen issues. And I think that would better inform the city, the proponents, as well as the DAP, in terms of its ongoing operation and whether any adjustments need to be made to its operation.
But why wouldn't the existing provisions in place, I mean, there's a lot of provisions in place now to manage that and to have regular reporting and the operational management plans and so on. Why would they not be satisfactory? What additional elements would there be that aren't part of the normal day-to-day operations?
Through you, presiding member.
It's a pretty extreme reaction to say, no, there is a point at which we're going to shut you down, which is essentially what would be. That would be a very extreme reaction, wouldn't it?
Through you, presiding member. And I think that's the very point. And I remind you, the city did not support this in the first instance.
But it's been approved.
I understand that. That's why I'm just representing the city's views. So cities did not support this application in the first instance because of that reliance on the operational management plan. We have to remember that this proposal, this development that's been approved, is operational 24/7 commercial land use in a residential area, and it allows for walk-ins day and night, unrestricted, uncontrolled. Now that in itself cannot be moderated by virtue of an operation management plan. Operation management plan can set out things from a reactionary sense that if these things occur, then put these measures in place. That's reactionary. So in terms of amenity compatibility, I think for something that is the first of its kind, not in Vincent, but in WA, it's been untested. I think it's prudent to demonstrate that it's successful in this location, in this setting, and that would be through a subsequent extension of time or planning approval, and they have 4 years or 5 years to be able to go through that process.
Would the city really close their doors in 4 years' time?
You, presiding member, the city would be required, if I'm speculating an application came before us, the city would be required to make a recommendation based on whether it's appropriate against the planning framework. And at this moment, there's been nothing to demonstrate from the city's perspective that's proven to be appropriate in that location. I think that's the issue.
Any further questions? I think you had a question.
He covered it.
Any other questions from panel members? Yes.
We heard today from the applicant around window coverings, and I know we had some comments about that in the further information that the city would provide. But I thought it might just be useful just to talk through some of those comments around the concerns, particularly that blinds would need to be opened and closed at the start and finish of every meeting and the impact. Thank you.
Yes, through the chair. So the city's built form policy as a starting point sets out its expectations around facade design, and that talks about building facades expressing internal functions and providing visual interest when viewed from the road. And then that, I guess, kind of segues into what the WAPC's Safer Places by Design document, which forms part of the SPP7 suite, talks to in terms of contributing to safer places, which is that built form should incorporate opportunities for passive surveillance, which would have the benefit of discouraging crime and antisocial behaviour from occurring, as well as increasing that perception of safety and security for users in that area. The premises itself is located across from Robertson Park, and throughout the community consultation, particularly in the first Form 1 application, we did hear a lot from the community about the concerns of antisocial behaviour occurring in that area and outside of the premises. What Safer Places by Design also sets out is that in the built form, maximising opportunities for passive surveillance, that can then be supplemented by more active surveillance measures such as CCTV and external security patrols, which the applicant has committed to providing through its operations management plan. But I guess the starting point is a built form response initially, and then for higher risk or those other measures can then be implemented. Throughout the Form 1 application as well, the city's DRP chair also provided comments that raised concerns with, I guess, the ground floor interface, and seeking to make sure that passive surveillance to Stewart Street could be maximised, as well as ensuring internal spaces maximise interactivity and transparency So the city's comments in relation to what has been put forward as part of this application is to try to seek a balance between recognising that there are particular areas of the ground floor that when used by individuals attending the premises should be provided with privacy, and I guess in that instance we would accept blinds could be pulled down to give that sense to the users, but outside of those times, open blinds and window coverings would at least give a sense of openness, transparency, even if individuals are not necessarily in that room at that particular time.
Any further questions? Yes.
So if I can follow up on that, this has got a fairly public interface, hasn't it? This building onto Stewart Street.
Yes.
The front door and people coming and going and so on. What additional set-10 measures practically are there in some of those private rooms as the blinds are down? I mean, in a measured sense.
Yeah, I think through the presiding member, it would just those particular rooms. So if you're referring to when the blinds are down,
There's some rooms which require privacy from time to time. There's some public areas there which are open anyway. There's some rooms which require privacy from time to time. My understanding is that they're asked to say, well, we don't want to be putting the blinds up and down every 5 minutes when people are coming in and out of the room. My question to you is, given there's a public interface onto Stewart Street, there is a section of the building which has got some private rooms which require privacy, but given you've got a public interface on Stewart Street anyway, what in measured terms additional surveillance is there, additional CEPTED outcomes? Because frankly, I can't see any.
Presiding member, because it goes back to the principle of trying to maximise opportunities for passive surveillance and to reflect that internal function. So I guess in those instances where the blinds are down, not the optimal outcome, but we accept that there is operational needs that do carry that need for privacy. And so for those periods, it would be less impactful, and it would be other windows that could provide for that similar sense of passive surveillance, but during other times we would be seeking to maximise that as much as possible.
You've got an area, but I'm asking in measured terms because you've got a period of about 10 or 15 metres of streetscape, of street frontage, which you're talking about, which is next to a public interface. What in measured terms is the difference for that?
Through the presiding member, I will just go back to what the DRP feedback was initially in terms of trying to maintain that active and engaging streetscape where possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions at this junction? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one on the time limited approval discussion. I guess if a time limited approval was granted, who would be the decision maker whether to extend that or deny any additional approval?
Through the presiding member, not speculating what the planning system may look like in 4 to 5 years' time, but if it were as it sits now, it would be through a Form 2 application through the DAP.
A Form 2 for a change of use, or it would be a continuation of use or a change of use?
It would be for a Form 2 to amend the conditions of approval.
So they would be coming back in 4 or 5 years' time to amend condition 2.2. Okay.
Yes. So did you want to make a
Through you, Presiding Member, I just wanted to make a comment. I didn't want to miss the opportunity. There was much discussed about condition 2.6. So I just wanted to provide some additional commentary. My sense is that there's common ground in terms of the intent between the proponents and the city. And the R13 was very useful to 5 years. So in terms of alternate wording, I know that there was mention around the words discourage unsupervised departures from occurring, and that was something that the city had drafted to include in the condition. that in itself, I just want to be clear, is not, that again represents the intent or the outcome that we're seeking to achieve. That is not the crux of the condition. In terms of the city's view on the applicant's suggested wording, we still maintain that it would be unclear to use terminology of facilitate an orderly discharge. That's more an intent or an outcome, right? So I think from the city's perspective, the suggested wording of that condition is really where, I'll read this out, the operator shall provide consumers that are discharged from and or individuals that are refused access to the premises with suitable transport options in accordance with the operations management plan to the satisfaction of the city. It's superfluous, so it's not critical that the words to discourage unsupervised departures from occurring needs to belong in that condition. So that would be my additional comments for your consideration, please.
So just to be clear, are you talking about your amended 2.6 or your original one?
Amended 2.6.
So that says the operator shall provide consumers, et cetera, suitable transport options.
Correct. In accordance with the operations management plan to the satisfaction of the city.
So you're not expecting handling of people outside the premises.
Yeah, we're accepting that, you cannot detain or restrain people outside the premises. And in terms of the intent that both the proponents and the city keep referring to, we feel that that's adequately enshrined in the operations management plan anyway, so that's superfluous for the purpose of this condition construct.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from panel members at this juncture? If there are not, we will move, thank you very much. We will move to the agenda item. There is a recommendation in the beginning of the agenda which has a series of amended conditions, as is the normal case or the required now under the changes to that provisions. We will seek a mover and seconder for the RA recommendation before dealing with either any amendments or alternative motion. Is there a mover for the RA recommendation as it reads in the agenda? It is moved. Ashley Wallace. Is there a seconder? Is there a seconder? Seconded Lee Donoghue. Okay, so what we've just moved onto the table is the motion as it reads in the agenda. Would the mover like to speak to that?
Yeah, I'll just speak very briefly. Thanks, Chair. Look, at a very broad scale, this is an incredibly necessary service in WA, something that we're very unequipped to deal with at the moment. So very supportive of this operation and the expansion of these services in Western Australia. It is, however, unprecedented in WA and a quite intense use within a high density residential area. So I'm generally supportive of the amended conditions as written in the main report. I think I'll speak a little bit on the time limited approval. Yes, to me, it comes down to the fact that this is an unprecedented use, particularly when you take into account the intensity and the duration that it will be operational. I think, a 24/7 commercial operation in a high density resident area will be difficult to support in any context, regardless of whether it's for drug and alcohol affected people or so yeah, I am supportive of keeping a time limit on this one. I think it's just provides an important check, a reasonable time into the operation of this service that we can review against the operational management plan, see if there's any unpredicted impacts or undue impacts that have arisen during that time, which I think because of the unprecedented nature, there is an opportunity for that to occur. I also think there was some discussion about what the impacts of an extra year was on the local community. I think if there were undue, unexpected impacts, an extra year living next to those is a very long time. But on the other hand, I think 4 years is an appropriate period of time to establish and for the community to adapt and accept this use to some extent. So I think it's quite important to keep that limit there. Generally agree with the city's comments as well on the proposed amended conditions, but I think we probably need to work through those one by one.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the motion as moved on the table.
Okay, given that we've already issued an approval for this use, I'm not going to repeat what was said at a previous meeting where the application was approved. I am supportive some of the changes, but I will be foreshadowing amendments to some of the conditions.
Thank you. Did you want to deal with any amendments and any amendments that we deal with?
I want to deal
the individual, just for everybody in the room.
Yeah.
In the past, some of the people who've been familiar with these processes would be aware that there's been potentially group amendments moved. That's not my style as the chair. I deal with it, obviously for both minute taking and reasons, and so obviously we have support staff here with us. So should you wish to move an amendment, we'll be dealing with them individually.
I prefer to deal with them individually.
Okay. So you want to move an amendment 1?
Amendment 1 will be a change to condition 2.2, which is increasing the time period of the approval from 4 years to 5. I'm doing so on the basis that whilst I note the concerns, it's a new development, a new type of development in this industry that is going to be located in a residential area, but I just think 5 years will give it time to settle in and hopefully address any concerns that are raised. I think 4 years is probably a bit short. I think it's reasonable, particularly given that they have a 9-year contract, to have a look at this again in 5 years. So that will be the first amendment that I'll be.
It is seconded. Baker, seconded John Syme. Seconded, like speak to the item.
My inclination is actually to have no time limits at all because there's improved use. My fallback is to actually have a 9-year time limit because it matches the contract. But I suspect that politic as it is, that 5 years is probably where we're going to end up. There is no question to me a couple of things. First of all, the 4-year time limit originally was a very arbitrary choice that was made at the time. There is no logic to it, particularly between 4 and 5 years. There is considerable logic which has been provided by the applicant as to why 5 years is appropriate. This is an approved use. It is an important one. I think that they're going to be able to manage this successfully. I can't, frankly, see the circumstance in which the city would get to a situation of having it close its doors. I mean, I could imagine the front page of the paper would be alive with comment. So I think from a practical point of view, and also from an operational point of view, and from the point of view of good management for the business, to give it a reasonable chance of actually doing what they say they're going to do, which I think is highly likely. I think 5 years is entirely appropriate.
Any other?
At a minimum.
Sorry. Sorry, Danny. Any further speakers? Yes.
Thank you. I support the city's recommendation around the approval period remaining at 4 years. I very much understand and appreciate the need for this very important community use that is a clear priority of the state government, but also particularly having walked around the area yesterday, that impact on the residential context, I do have concerns about, particularly given the scale and nature of the operations. And I agree with the city's comments today that the 4-year approval period will moderate the impact of that approval in that residential context, particularly given the reliance on the operational management plan, which is likely to react. Also agree with the comments made by the city's offices today around the 4-year period presenting ample opportunity for the operator to demonstrate that it will be successful in moderating that impact on residential.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the amendment? Yes.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not in support of this amendment. I think we've heard a lot about the commercial considerations around duration of the approval. I don't really give much regard to those. We've also heard that it's not on the proponent to demonstrate why it's acceptable from a planning framework perspective. I don't agree with that either. I think to me it still comes back to this is an unprecedented use. It's extremely high density. It's in a very extremely high intensity. It's a 24/7 hour operation. It's within a residential area, And yet critically, again, it's unprecedented. So I think keeping it at 4 years is very much appropriate. It's a long enough period that the applicant can demonstrate compliance to the conditions in their operational management plan. It's a long enough period for the idea of it being in a neighbourhood to settle within the local community. And, you know, if that all goes well, they'll be used for sliding through. So I support this amendment.
Thank you. I will speak to the motion. I would concur with a number of comments that have been said. I would agree that the use itself, as determined some time ago, is a use that is unusual for that particular site and that location. And I would agree that there is, I probably wouldn't use the same language in terms of unprecedented use, but I do agree that time limited approval is appropriate in the context of setting. And I think that some of the comments provided by the officers here today, there's a reasonableness in relation to time to consider the impacts. That being said, I would also agree with some of the comments provided by the applicant that a time limit approval is appropriate. I don't have any issues with increasing the time to 5 years. Any determination by this panel or any other determining body on the merits of the proposal at a future point, any determination would typically occur within that time, that 5-year time limit. So you're probably only assessing over a 4-year period ultimately of an operation. That being said, I think it is incumbent on the applicant to do all associated actions to ensure that they can demonstrate, as has been expressed today here from a variety of manners, in a variety of ways, that they are a suitable and appropriate activity ongoing long-term into the future. And I think it is reasonable that the operation can be fully operational and been operating for a period of time to provide evidence for all sides in relation to its operation. I don't have any issue with an amendment to the approval period for 5 years. I would agree that in terms of amenity impacts, that 1 year has an ability to be dealing with those issues, ability for any issues to have been worked through in terms of appropriateness or modifications to operational management plan, and it produces the evidence that both the use and the operator are in fact ensuring that the activity is appropriate for long term within its location. For those comments, I would believe both from a planning perspective and all of the other reasons in terms of use that it's appropriate to support a extension of time. So that is a modification to condition 2.2 for 5 year, changing from 4 to 5 year period. I move back to the mover of amendment 1 for right of reply and close of debate.
Further debate, sorry.
We're now going to vote. All those in favour of amendment 1 only. Against? The minute take, it is carried. Carried 3-2. Do you have the members? Thank you. I'm back to member Leo Donoghue. Do you have?
Condition 2.3, there was an error. I believe that all parties are happy with the change in the time periods from 8:30 to 5:30 being modified to 8 a.m. and 5:30 p.m.
Is there a seconder for amendment 2? It is seconded. Nicole Wolf. Sorry, Nicole. Apologies. Nicole Wolf. Would the mover like to speak to amendment 2?
It just seems to me that all the parties are in agreement to a change in those time periods. I don't think that 30 minutes is going to have a huge impact. I'm supportive of reducing the time period to 8 a.m. to 5:30.
Would the seconder like to speak to amendment 2?
No, this is just fixing an oversight.
Are there any other speakers on amendment 2? There is no debate, so we're going straight to the vote. All those in favour? For the minute taker, amendment 2 is carried unanimously. We are now back to yourself, member Leo Donoghue. Do you have anything further you wish to?
Okay. There's another one, condition 2.6 regarding supervision of clients. The points raised in a legal sense about the ability to actually restrain or control the behaviour of people noted. I'm actually putting forward from Regulation 13 that the city proposed a modification to this condition. whereby the words are changed. And I just want to confirm that it will read, the operator shall provide consumers that are discharged from and or individuals that are refused access to the premises with suitable or several transport options to discourage unsupervised departures from occurring in accordance with the operation management plan to the satisfaction of the city. Now, so I'm going to.
Did the minute taker get the wording? So that is moved. It's taken from the R13 with slight inclusion in the language there. Is there a seconder for Amendment 3? It is seconded, Nicole Wolfe. Would the mover like to speak to it?
Oh, simply that I'm the comments provided by Mr. McQueen. I've taken those on board. I think that that's actually quite true. You can't force these things. So I'm happy with that change that allows more flexibility in dealing with those individuals.
Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
Just to say that I think this is a really sound way forward. And it does establish clear expectations that help address the amenity impact concerns, whilst also addressing that legal issue that transport options can't be forced or someone can't be detained against them if they don't take those up. I don't think it does come down to semantics on this one, and I think that the city's proposed wording really clearly establishes those expectations. So happy to support them.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on Amendment 3? Yes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I actually support the original condition as worded. I don't think it requested the proponent to do anything particularly unlawful. They had to ensure that they don't leave unsupervised, which I presume means to the extent of their lot. So yeah, I see the perspective, but yeah, I don't support.
Thank you. Any other speakers on Amendment 3? Yes.
I do support this. The original wording, I don't think is satisfactory. And in fact, it's more nebulous than this one. So I think this is much clearer, particularly about the expectations of what is required of people when they're outside the premises, which is very difficult to either do anything about, really.
Thank you. I'll speak to this item. I would agree and support the alternate wording as put forward in this amendment. I am conscious that there was a number of submissions presented directly to this panel when the original application came up. There is definitely some concern and anxiety within the community. Any clarification that can be provided in the condition in relation to the limitations and the obligations of an operator is important. I think this wording does assist providing that clarity within the public domain in particular. The limitations of any private operator beyond in terms of other regulatory bodies such as the policing, the statutory bodies such as policing, and it also references other matters that happen in the area. And we did hear through the initial application when considered some time ago that there is a park obviously directly opposite it, and there had been expressed concerns in relation to individuals in the park, and there is a separation of what the role of this organisation and this proposal can do with other elements within other matters that might occur within that local community. So I think clarification of the obligations is important. Those are my comments on Amendment 3. I move back to the mover for right of reply on Amendment.
No further debate.
Now going to the vote. All those in favour on Amendment 3. Against? It's carried 4-1. Does the minute taker get the vote? Has the minute taker got the vote? Thank you. We move back to the Member Lee O'Donoghue. Do you have any other comments you wish to make?
Just one more amendment, which will be the inclusion of an advice note regarding condition 4.1 that I'm taking the words of the applicant in this regard, but it does not preclude the use of window furnishings such as curtains and blinds. I'm suggesting that this be included because I do believe in the need for privacy at times, given the nature of the organisation and the things that will occur.
What's being moved onto the table for the minute taker is that a new advice note reads that condition 4.1 does not preclude the use of window furnishings such as curtains and blinds. Is there a seconder for the advice note. It is seconded. John, sign. Would the mover like to speak to the item?
Oh, look, I just, very briefly, I do think, whilst I understand the streetscape concerns and surveillance and those issues, there are going to be times when there isn't going to be a need for privacy in rooms that are facing on the street.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to the item?
Yes, look, I think I have made my views clear in the questioning. There is plenty of the septet argument. I think is not a convincing one. In this instance, there's plenty of surveillance naturally coming out of this building, and the way the public spaces are facing Stewart Street. I think expecting any more of that, particularly from the rooms which are going to be used for private consultations, is way overreach. And I think the ability of the operator to be able to manage those in the way that they need to from day to day, I think is important to sustain.
Any other speakers on amendment 4? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I don't support the addition of this advice note. I agree with the city's recommendation in the RAR. I think on the one hand, you do have a really strong need for privacy in the context of this sensitive use of the IDAP, but also on the other hand, there's that real need for passive surveillance in the issues that we've all heard around antisocial behaviour in the area. And I think that the city's recommendation provides a balance.
Thank you. Any other speakers on amendment 4? I will speak to amendment 4. I would concur again with most of the comments that have been said. From my perspective, I do support this amendment. The reasons for supporting the amendment is there's already been some comment made about the building itself. And then I suppose from my perspective, the biggest and one of the significant considerations that I've got is that, as been discussed at today's meeting, the applicant has a responsibility to ensure that those measures input into this proposal as part of a suite of conditions that sit with it are particularly in relation to impact on the surrounding area, as has been expressed today both by applicant and others, is a critical part of justifying and continuing to support the use that has been has a time-limited approval on it, and in terms of its suitability and appropriateness and the long-term ongoing on the area. It's been discussed by all parties today, and from my perspective, whether or not the applicant is opening or shutting blinds is an operational consideration, but what's a bigger issue for them is ensuring that they can do everything possible within their control to ensure that they are and have the evidence to ensure that they can show that their actions have been they've taken all possible avenues to manage the interface and the amenity activities associated, the amenity interface associated with the use. So I think that the applicant will appropriately make a judgment on those, and the amount, the extent of surveillance from that site into the public domain is part of the obligations that they have in justifying the long-term considerations of the suitability of the use on that site, and I would expect that they will take that very seriously and do all within their abilities to ensure that there is as much surveillance as is suitably possible. So for those reasons, I am supportive of the Amendment 4 and advice note. Over to the mover for right of reply.
No further comment.
Right of reply has been had. We are now going to the vote. We are dealing with Amendment 4 advice note as written, as the wording I've just read out. All those in favour? Against? It's carried 4-1. For the minute taker, have you got the vote?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, back to Member Leo Donoghue. Is there anything further you wish?
No, nothing further to add.
Okay, we've now, let me get back up to where I start from. Any other speakers on the RA recommendation? Yes.
There's a query from everybody. There's some issues around 3.1 and 3.2, which I skated over. The applicant has proposed some changes there, which I understand the city is supporting. Seems to me the matters of application.
So what would you like to do?
Well, I understand the cities have agreed with what the applicant is proposing, so the applicant is proposing
Applicant is proposing a deletion
of condition 3.1 and an additional dot point into 3.2, which says within 30 days of any updated acoustic design report being approved by the city, which offers operational aspects of use.
So is the amendment, are you moving an amendment relating to 3.1 and 3.2?
Can I just
Okay.
ask the city, is that sensible? Does that make sense?
Through the presiding member, yes, so essentially condition 3.1 at the moment does two things. It relates back to condition 2.6. So this panel in amending condition 2.6 would mean that there's no further changes to the OMP.
So we can delete 3.1 and add that clause to 3.2 and it does the job?
Yeah, to deal with the acoustic report.
Thank you. I'll move that.
So the move for the minute taker and for those that are in the audience, what is being moved onto the table? Condition 3.1 is deleted.
Yes.
Condition 3.2 operational management plan. There is a clause added. It becomes point 4, point 4, I think. There is still further dot point, but it's slots in there. It says within 30 days of an updated acoustic design report.
Being approved by the city and which orders operational aspects of the use. That's the city.
Within 30 days, yes. So for the minute taker, can we just get clarity on that? Do you clear what we're talking about? What is being moved onto the table is the wording of 3.2 operational management plan is the wording in the R13. That's correct?
Correct.
So that's under comment on condition 3.2. That wording says within 30 days of an updated acoustic design report being approved by the city and which alters operational aspects of the use. Okay, is there a seconder for amendment 5? It is seconded, Nicole Wolf. Would the mover like to speak to
No, I
amendment
don't think
5?
there's anything needs to be said.
Would the seconder like to speak? Any other speakers on amendment 5? Yes.
Sorry, can I just get some clarity on what's being moved here? I'm having trouble following.
Yes, sure. So there's two aspects to the, sorry, if you want to.
3.1, as it is moved, refers to the old 2.6, which now changed 2.6. 3.1 becomes redundant, but there's an issue on of its application to the second leg of it, which is referring to an acoustic design report, which now belongs to the dot point within 3.2.
So sorry, 3.1 is proposed to be deleted.
Yes.
Entirely.
Yes.
Okay, can I ask a question on that? Sorry,
Yes, you can. Yes, yes. No, you can.
Yeah, so I guess the amended condition 3.1 on page 1 of the agenda has 2.1 deals with the acoustic design report and the second is to provide further detail on transportation arrangements for consumers accessing the discussion. I support the commentary around deleting the acoustic design report. I guess to me, I think it's pretty critical that the operations management plan, given the I think it was, does provide that detail on transportation arrangements available for consumers accessing and discharging the facility. So it would not be moving that if that's what was proposed.
Yep. Are you asking a question at this juncture, or are you just?
I'm not sure. It's half statement, half question. So if let me make a statement then. If it's being moved, that second dot point around transportation arrangements is being moved, then I'm not to be removed, then I'm not supportive of this motion. If it isn't, then happy to support because I do agree to the changes. To the district design.
So it's proposing to remove whole of 3.1.
Not supportive of that, and would be supportive of a motion just to remove the references to the acoustic design report.
Thank you. Any other speakers on Amendment 5? Everyone's clear what's happening? If there's no other speakers, I'll go back to the mover for right of reply on Amendment 5.
No.
The right of reply has been had on Amendment 5. We are now going to the vote, which is deletion of condition 3.1 in its entirety and modification or condition 3.2 having an added provision in it. All those in favour? Against? It is carried 3-2. Did you get the vote? Okay. Okay, we need now move back to Member John Syme. Do you have any further comments you wish to make?
No, I think we've worked through everything.
Other members, is there any further members that wish to speak on this motion? I will make some comments myself. I would, the proposal that's already been discussed today is in terms of the use has been determined at, for a time limit approval has been determined at the previous meeting. These modifications don't substantially change the decision that has been made and therefore are consistent with being dealt with as amendments to the proposal. The changes that have been made seek to both clarify certain aspects of it and don't unduly alter the development that's been determined, particularly in relation to the 5 years. I'm satisfied that it's already indicated that that's an appropriate timeline that can be appropriately dealt with and demonstrated one way or the other that provides context around additional further information around both use and local area and provides some clarity around a number of matters that are in that space. So I think the change of timeframe is appropriate. Overall, the changes to those various conditions I don't have any issue with. I do think these are consistent with the overall development application, and I thank the city officers for providing in a very short time frame a response to the matters that were raised through the submissions, and I do appreciate they were really only given to you, I think, yesterday. So that has provided a lot of clarity for myself in understanding both elements to the proposal. Overall, I'm supportive of the recommendation. Substantive motion inclusive of those various amendments that have carried. I move back to the RA recommendation for mover for right of reply.
Is it too late to introduce an amendment at this point?
No, because we haven't had right of reply. I'm more than happy for you to. It's unusual, but I am more than happy. You want to move a amendment?
Yes, amendment. Thank you, Chair. That might be a little unusual at times.
6.
This would be, reintroduce condition 3.1, just with the wording of the second dot point. Introduced prior to the operation or use of the operations management plan dated May 2024 shall be updated and submitted and approved by the city. The updated operations management plan is to provide further detail on arrangements for consumers accessing and discharging, including individuals refused access from the premises to ensure that the consumers and or individuals are not dignified.
Okay, so that is Amendment 6. So it's a reintroduction for consideration of amendment of condition 3.1 as it reads in the body of the RA at point 2. That is moved by Member Ashley Wallace. Is there a seconder for the seconded for Amendment 6 to reintroduce condition 3.2? Would the mover like to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you. Look, this is really critical to me. The manner with which consumers accessing and discharging the lot is the most likely aspect of this proposal to have impacts on the surrounding community. I read the wording of individuals do not leave unsupervised to be basically limited to the extents of the lot, and I think it's appropriate to include within the operations management plan just setting out what those are and how they will be made available to the consumers accessing and discharging. So I don't think it's a particularly onerous condition on the proponent, but I think it's very worthwhile to have that detail included in the operational management plan so that when the time limited approval, if that's what occurs, is up, it's another item that can be assessed by the panel in the city at that time as to whether these users have been appropriately managed.
Thank you. Would the seconder like to speak to Amendment 6? Any other speakers on Amendment 6? Johnson.
Yeah, look, I understand the sentiment, and I don't disagree with it. The only problem I have with this is that it reintroduces elements of the original 2.6 in a way that we have now under discussion agreed, and the operations management plan as updated already contains substantial detail on transportation arrangements. So that's already in the operations management plan and has been accepted, as I understand it, or certainly it certainly exists in those terms. So I understand the sentiment, but I don't think I can actually vote for this because it reintroduces some elements which we've actually worked through and are covered by our now approved 2.6. So I don't think this is a good idea. It becomes a level of confusion into the conditions, which I think would be unhelpful.
Any other speakers? I will make a comment slightly different than others have made, but it does reiterate some of the comments I've said. This determination that currently sits in place, as well as the considerations that we're talking about today, particularly and for me most significantly, is a time limitation on the approval. From my perspective, the discussion today that I am hearing loud and clear is that it's an unprecedented use in this area. It's unique in terms of being both in WA and this location. There is surrounding local context and setting for the site, including a residential area, and that the operator has obligations to, over the longer term, support through that time limited approval the suitability for ongoing suitability of the use, and that, so we reiterated in relation to other matters today, the operator, I believe, has expressed today loud and clear that they have intentions based on the information provided to us and the words that have been given to us of doing all they can to ensure that the operation seamlessly sits within the local context, and that they will manage the external impacts associated with the site. From my perspective, that includes the movement of people to and from the site and providing suitable arrangements for people to essentially not linger within the community and to get transport to the places they need to go. I don't support a reintroduction of this provision. I am satisfied that the provisions that have been said in relation to both this item and in the comments that have been said in relation to various amendments, that there are obligations for demonstration of the use's appropriateness. The city has expressed this, applicant themselves have expressed this, and the members today have expressed it, and the applicant has expressed that transportation out of the site is part of the suite of actions that they can do within their ability to ensure that the operation is seamless within the community is an obligation on them as part of the decision that currently is in place and the matters that we're discussing today. So I'm not supportive of Amendment 6. I think that the obligations are there for the applicant, and these conditions that we've dealt with today are appropriate. So as I say, I'm comfortable with Amendment 6. The introduction of 3.1 is not necessary under the current reasons I've just given. Those are my comments. I move back to the mover. Or sorry, is there any other comments?
So presiding member, is Amendment 6 something we could get a comment from the city officers on?
You can ask a comment. Yes, you can. I'll accept that.
Thank you.
City officers, there's been a request for you to provide some comment on the amendment that's just been moved onto the table.
Through the presiding member, yes, the city did touch on this in the R13 response that was circulated yesterday. I guess in summary, the DAP was accepting of the modification to condition 6, which actually it was through the amendment today. The city's view is that the OMP does deal with the alternative transport arrangements that have been provided. So from that perspective, we would say there's nothing further to be added to the OMP. So that point could be, I guess, deleted.
Anything further you want? Any other speakers before we move back to move for right of reply on Amendment 6?
Yeah, very convincing arguments put forward by the other panel members, and I appreciate the advice from the city, so I'll take a second unusual move and probably submit a motion on this one. Thank you for entertaining me.
Members, we've had a right of reply. We are going to the vote on Amendment 6. All those in favour? Against? It's lost. We move back. I think what that shows up for everybody around the table, that it is thoroughly debated and that members don't hold any decision or pre-considerations on these matters. Lost a bit of it here. If there are no other speakers on the substantive, we're going back to yourself as the mover of the substantive right of reply and close of the vote.
No, I think I've said everything I need to on this one.
Thank you. The substantive motion is going to be put. It is a substantive motion inclusive of the amendments that were carried, which is 1 to 5. All those in favour? Carried unanimously for the minute taker. We move back to the agenda. We are now moving on to part D, the state administrative applications and listed in the agenda. I have no comments. There is no general business, and I close today's meeting